This is a work of fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the only place where we tell you the truth about what is actually happening in the swamp, not what the mainstream media wants you to believe is happening. We are looking at a spectacle today, a veritable circus act on Capitol Hill that would be hilarious if it weren't so dangerous to the future of this republic. I'm talking about the absolute show trial we just witnessed in the Senate Judiciary Committee, starring none other than the high priestess of the woke left, Senator Elizabeth Warren. If you have been watching the news, you have seen the clips, you have seen the headlines screaming about corruption and Russian money, but you need to take a step back and look at the theatrics because that is exactly what this is. This isn't an investigation, this is an audition tape for the radical base of the Democrat Party, and Attorney General Pam Bondi is merely the prop Warren is using to boost her own poll numbers. Let's set the scene properly because context is the one thing the legacy media refuses to give you. You have Elizabeth Warren, a woman who has built her entire career on lecturing the American people, sitting there with her glasses perched on her nose, shuffling papers like a disappointed schoolmum ready to rap knuckles. She isn't there to find the truth, she is there to destroy a political opponent who represents a threat to the established order. They are terrified of Pam Bondi, and they should be, because she is an attorney general who actually understands how to enforce the law rather than just weaponize it against conservatives. So, what do they do when they are scared? They revert to the classics. They pull out the dusty, dog-eared playbook from 2016 and they scream Russia. It is predictable, it is tiring, and frankly, it is insulting to the intelligence of the American voter. Now, let's look at the substance of these so-called bombshell allegations. Warren claims she has a paper trail. She waves these documents around about $847,000 moving through offshore accounts. In the world of international business and high-stakes legal consulting, let's be honest, that is a rounding error. But notice the language she uses. She uses words like shell companies and shadow banks. These are buzzwords designed to trigger an emotional response in people who don't understand how global finance works. Every company in Delaware could be described as a shell company if you wanted to frame it that way. The Democrats are masters of linguistic framing. They take a standard transaction, sprinkle some ominous adjectives on it, and suddenly it's a conspiracy against the United States. What is truly rich here is the source of this moral outrage. We are being lectured on financial propriety and foreign influence by the same party that has looked the other way for decades when it comes to their own. We don't need to name names because you know who they are, the families who have become multimillionaires while working in public service on a government salary. Yet, when a Republican, a private citizen at the time, engages in business, suddenly every wire transfer is scrutinized under a microscope. It is a dual system of justice, plain and simple. If your last name is Biden or Clinton, money from overseas is just a business deal. If you are part of the MAGA movement or an ally of Donald Trump, it is treason. The hypocrisy is so thick you could cut it with a knife, but Elizabeth Warren sits there with a straight face, acting as if she is the paragon of virtue. Let's talk about the specific accusation regarding the evading of sanctions. This is the hook they are trying to sink into Bondi. The narrative they are spinning is that she was secretly working for Russian interests to bypass American laws. Think about the logic of that for a second. We are talking about an attorney general who has been vetted, who has been in the public eye, who has served the people of Florida. Do you really believe, for 1 second, that she would risk her entire career and her freedom for less than $1 million? It doesn't pass the smell test. It defies common sense. But common sense is not a currency that holds much value in the Senate hearing room when the cameras are rolling. This is about painting a picture of corruption so that they can cripple the Department of Justice before it can start investigating the real crimes that have been committed against the American people over the last 4 years. And then there is the matter of the emails. Oh, the emails. Warren talks about encrypted emails and deleted records as if using security measures is an admission of guilt. In today's world, where every digital footprint is tracked and where political enemies leak private conversations to the press, encryption is not a crime, it is a necessity for survival. If you are a high-profile conservative, you would be a fool not to encrypt your communications. But Warren twists this. She frames basic operational security as evidence of a cover-up. It is a masterful manipulation of perception. She takes the prudent actions of a target and turns them into the suspicious actions of a criminal. It is the same tactic they used with the Russia hoax, implying that if you have nothing to hide, you should just hand over the keys to your entire life to people who want to destroy you. The media is making a huge deal out of Bondi's silence. They are running chyrons right now saying, Bondi speechless, or Bondi unable to answer. Let's analyze that moment because it is the pivot point of the whole drama. You have Warren badgering her, cutting her off, firing questions at a machine gun pace, not allowing a single complete sentence to be uttered in response. That is not an interrogation, that is a filibuster disguised as a question. When Bondi sits there, stone-faced, refusing to engage in the shouting match, that isn't an admission of guilt. That is the discipline of a prosecutor. She knows that anything she says will be twisted, clipped out of context, and played on CNN for the next week. Her silence is a refusal to participate in her own lynching. It is a power move, not a surrender. But look at how it is being portrayed. The liberal pundits are practically salivating. They are writing the obituaries for her career as we speak. They are saying that institutional accountability is finally catching up with her. What nonsense. What we are seeing is the institutional protection racket kicking into high gear. The deep state, the permanent bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it, they utilize people like Warren to do their dirty work. They drop these dossiers and transcripts that just happen to appear at the most politically convenient moments. Does anyone really believe it is a coincidence that this information surfaces just as the DOJ was preparing to pivot toward aggressive enforcement of border security and election integrity? There are no coincidences in Washington, D.C. We need to dig deeper into the evidence Warren claims to have. She mentions intermediaries and meetings. In the world of high-level politics and law, everyone meets with intermediaries. That is how diplomacy works. That is how business works. Just because you are in a room with a Russian doesn't mean you are a Russian asset. If that were the standard, half of the Senate would be in handcuffs. But they rely on the ignorance of the general public regarding these procedures. They rely on you hearing the word Russian and immediately shutting down your critical thinking skills. It is Pavlovian conditioning at this point. They ring the bell, and the voters are supposed to salivate with outrage. But we are waking up to it. We have seen this movie before, and the plot holes are getting bigger every time they try to remake it. Let's focus on the figure of $847,000 again. In the grand scheme of Washington corruption, that is lunch money. We have sent billions of dollars to Ukraine with zero accountability. We have seen members of Congress beat the stock market by margins that are statistically impossible without insider information. Yet, we are supposed to believe that this specific transaction is the one that threatens the Republic? It is selective outrage. It is a precision strike designed to take out a key player on the Trump team. They know they can't beat the policies, so they try to criminalize the personnel. It is lawfare in its purest form. They don't need a conviction in a court of law, they just need a conviction in the court of public opinion to make her radioactive. Elizabeth Warren's performance was exactly that, a performance. Did you notice how she paused for the cameras? Did you notice how she modulated her voice to sound trembling with indignation? It is bad acting. It is community theater for the coastal elites. She is playing to the donors in Martha's Vineyard and San Francisco who want to see blood. They want a scalp. They haven't been able to stop the momentum of the America First movement at the ballot box, so they are trying to stop it in the hearing room. This is desperation masking itself as justice. They are terrified that if Bondi is allowed to do her job, she will expose the rot that has festered in that city for decades. So, they have to stop her. They have to paint her as a criminal so that when she goes after the real criminals, they can say it is just retaliation. You have to ask yourself, where did these bank records come from? Banks don't just hand over client data to senators because they ask nicely. There are subpoenas, there are warrants, there are processes. Or, there are leaks. Illegal leaks from within the Treasury or the intelligence community. That is the real scandal here. Who is weaponizing the financial data of American citizens to target political opponents? If they can do this to the Attorney General of the United States, imagine what they can do to you. Imagine if you donated to the wrong cause or supported the wrong candidate, and suddenly your bank records are being read aloud on C-SPAN by a socialist senator. This is a violation of privacy on a massive scale, but nobody in the media is asking how Warren got the documents. They are only talking about what is in them. The allegations about influencing US policy are particularly vague. That is by design. If you make the charge specific, it can be disproven. If you say someone influenced policy, it is nebulous enough to stick without requiring hard proof. Every lobbyist in DC influences policy. Every donor influences policy. That is the ugly reality of the swamp. But when Bondi does it, it is framed as treason. They are trying to draw a line between this money and specific decisions made, but watch closely, Warren never actually connects the dots. She just puts the dots on the page and screams at you to connect them yourself. She relies on innuendo. She relies on the appearance of impropriety, rather than actual impropriety. It is a legal sleight of hand. We also need to address the emotional aspect of this hearing. Warren is trying to provoke a reaction. She wants Bondi to snap. She wants an angry soundbite. She wants the angry conservative woman clip that they can run on loop. By staying silent, by refusing to give them that satisfaction, Bondi is actually winning the psychological war. But the media will spin it as defeat. They are already writing the narrative that she was stunned into silence. No, she was silent because you don't argue with a crazy person in the middle of a street, and you don't argue with a senator who has already written the verdict before the trial has even started. It is a kangaroo court. Why dignify it with a defense? The tragedy here is that while they are wasting time on this witch hunt, real problems are being ignored. The border is still a crisis. Inflation is still crushing working families. Crime is rampant in our cities. But the Senate Judiciary Committee isn't holding hearings on that. No, they are obsessed with an $800,000 transaction from years ago involving a woman they hate. It shows you exactly where their priorities lie. They don't care about you. They don't care about your safety or your wallet. They care about maintaining their grip on power, and they view Pam Bondi as a threat to that grip. That is the long and short of it. This narrative about evading sanctions is also a convenient way to bring the foreign policy establishment into the mix. The blob, the foreign policy elites, hates anyone who questions the status quo on Russia or Ukraine. By tying Bondi to sanctions evasion, they are signaling to the establishment that she is an enemy of the state. It is a way to unite the Democrats and the establishment Republicans, the rhinos, against her. It is a classic pincer movement. You attack her character from the left, and you attack her patriotism from the right. It is a coordinated hit job, and if you aren't paying close attention, you might fall for it. But we know better. We know that in this town, the louder they scream corruption, the more likely it is that they are projecting their own sins onto their enemies. Elizabeth Warren has never created a job in her life. She has never had to make a payroll. She has spent her life in academia and government, telling other people how to live. Bondi has been in the trenches. She has fought the cartels, she has fought the opioid manufacturers. She has a record of taking on tough fights. That is why they want to take her out. They don't hunt rabbits, they hunt lions. And make no mistake, Pam Bondi is a lioness in a den of hyenas. The use of the deleted records accusation is the final nail in their flimsy coffin. It is the catch-all. If they can't find the crime, they say the evidence was deleted. It is the perfect conspiracy theory because the absence of evidence becomes the evidence itself. We can't find the proof, which proves she destroyed it. It is circular logic that would get you laughed out of a first-year law school class, but in the United States Senate, it passes for high drama. It is intellectual dishonesty of the highest order. So let's really unpack this term that Warren kept throwing around like a grenade, shell companies. It sounds sinister, doesn't it? It sounds like something out of a Jason Bourne movie. But let's get real about what a shell company actually is in the legal world. It is often just a holding company. It is an LLC. It is a standard vehicle used by business owners, real estate developers, and yes, high-powered attorneys, to protect assets and maintain a modicum of privacy. If you own a rental property, your accountant has probably told you to put it in an LLC. Does that make you a money launderer? Does that make you a Russian asset? According to Elizabeth Warren's logic, maybe it does. They take these mundane, bureaucratic structures and weaponize them to scare the average voter who works a 9-to-5 and doesn't deal with corporate law. It is fearmongering 101. They rely on the fact that you don't know the difference between a Delaware LLC and a criminal enterprise, and they blur the lines intentionally. And let's talk about the timing of this $847,000 payment. We are talking about transactions that happened in the past, when Bondi was a private citizen. Since when did it become illegal for a private lawyer to have clients? Since when did we start criminalizing the practice of law? Everyone deserves representation. That is a foundational principle of our justice system. But the Democrats have decided that if you represent the wrong people, meaning anyone they don't like, you are tainted. You are radioactive. They tried this with the lawyers who defended Trump during the impeachment. They tried to disbar them. Now they are doing it to Bondi. They are sending a message to every lawyer in America: if you work for conservatives, or if you touch any money that we can vaguely link to Russia, we will destroy you. It is a chilling effect designed to leave Republicans without legal defense. The intermediaries Warren mentions are another piece of this puzzle. She rattles off these names as if they are on the FBI's most wanted list. But in the world of international consulting, you deal with fixers, you deal with brokers. That is how the world works outside of the faculty lounge at Harvard. Warren lives in a bubble where everything is theoretical. Bondi lives in the real world where you have to deal with unsavory characters to get things done, to gather intelligence, or to close a deal. Just because you shook hands with a guy who knows Putin doesn't mean you are taking orders from the Kremlin. This is the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon game, but played with treason charges. It is ridiculous. If we applied this standard to the Biden family, with their diamonds from China and their board seats in Ukraine, the entire administration would be in prison. But again, it is rules for thee, but not for me. We also need to look at the optics of the hearing room itself. Did you see the other senators? The Democrats were all nodding along like bobbleheads, performing their outrage on cue. The Republicans looked bored, and rightfully so. They know this is a nothing burger. They know this is theater. But look at how the cameras framed it. They zoomed in on Bondi's face, looking for a twitch, a bead of sweat, anything they could use. And when they didn't get it, they got frustrated. You could hear the frustration in Warren's voice rising. She wasn't getting the reaction she wanted. She wanted a confession. She wanted Bondi to break down and say, "Yes, I did it." But Bondi gave her nothing. That is the discipline of a professional. And it drives the left absolutely insane because they thrive on emotional validation. They need you to validate their anger, and when you don't, they don't know what to do. Let's pivot to the evading sanctions charge because this is the most serious accusation and also the most flimsy. Sanctions law is incredibly complex. There are carve-outs, there are exceptions, there are licenses you can apply for. It is a minefield. To accuse someone of evading sanctions, you usually need years of investigation by OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control. You need a paper trail that shows intent to deceive. What did Warren have? She had some wire transfers and a theory. She had a narrative. She is trying to bypass the entire investigative process and go straight to the verdict. She is acting as prosecutor, judge, and jury. This is dangerous, folks. If a United States Senator can declare you guilty of a federal crime on live television based on half-baked evidence, then the presumption of innocence is dead in this country. And who gave her these encrypted emails? That is the question we should be screaming from the rooftops. Encryption is end-to-end. That means only the sender and the receiver can read it. If Warren has the contents of encrypted emails, that means one of two things: either the encryption was broken by a state actor, like the NSA or the CIA, and then illegally leaked to a senator, or someone on the inside betrayed Bondi. Both scenarios are terrifying. If our intelligence agencies are decrypting the private communications of political figures and handing them to the opposition party, we are living in a police state. We are living in East Germany. This is what the Church Committee hearings in the 70s were about, stopping the intelligence community from spying on Americans. But the modern Democrat Party loves the intelligence community now because the intelligence community helps them stay in power. They are in bed together. The irony of Elizabeth Warren, the woman who lied about her own ethnicity for decades to get ahead in her career, lecturing anyone on truth and transparency, is almost too much to bear. This is a woman who appropriated a minority identity to get a job at Harvard. She is the ultimate fraud. Yet, she sits there on her high horse, judging Pam Bondi. It takes a special kind of lack of self-awareness to do that. But that is the defining characteristic of the modern left. They are incapable of shame. They project their own moral failings onto their enemies and then attack them with righteous fury. It is a psychological pathology, and it is running our government. Let's talk about the $847,000 again. Let's put it in context of what a top-tier attorney makes. If you are a partner at a major DC or New York law firm, you are billing $2,000 an hour. $847,000 is a few months of work on a big case. It is not, I sold my soul to Russia, money. It is, I did a complex job for a wealthy client, money. The Democrats want you to think that anyone making money is inherently evil. They demonize success. Unless, of course, the money comes from selling books about how terrible America is, or from speaking fees at Goldman Sachs. Then it is fine. Then it is the market rate. But if a Republican makes money, it is corruption. They want to starve conservatives out of the professional class. They want to make it so that if you are a Republican, you can't get a job, you can't get a bank account, and you can't make a living. Bondi's silence regarding the specific policy changes she allegedly advocated for is also being spun. Warren claims Bondi changed U.S. policy to favor these Russian interests. Which policy? When? How? The U.S. government is a massive ship. It doesn't turn on a dime because one person made a phone call. Policy changes go through interagency review, they go through the National Security Council. To think that Bondi single-handedly altered U.S. foreign policy for $800,000 is giving her more credit than she deserves. It portrays the U.S. government as this fragile thing that can be bought for the price of a nice house in the suburbs. It is absurd. But it fits the narrative that Trump and his allies were recklessly transactional. It reinforces the Russia lie that they have been pushing since 2016. We have to understand that this hearing was not about facts. It was a content creation session. Warren was creating clips for TikTok and Twitter. Her staff was probably editing the video while the hearing was still going on. They want the viral moment where she destroys Bondi. They don't care about the answers. In fact, they prefer that Bondi doesn't answer because it makes the editing easier. They can cut from Warren's question to Bondi's silence and add some dramatic music and boom, you have a viral hit. We are governed by influencers now, not legislators. They are chasing engagement, not truth. And Pam Bondi was just the content for the day. Think about the precedent this sets. If the Senate Judiciary Committee can demand the private financial records of any political appointee and interpret them in the worst possible light, who would ever want to serve in government? Who would put themselves through this? Only people who have nothing to lose or people who are already part of the swamp. Competent, successful people from the private sector will look at what is happening to Bondi and say, no thanks. And maybe that is the point. Maybe they want to drive out the outsiders. They want to ensure that only lifelong bureaucrats and career politicians run the show. They are circling the wagons to protect their turf. There is another angle here, the gender angle. The media loves to talk about misogyny, but only when it applies to liberal women. When a conservative woman is attacked, when she is badgered, when she is treated with disrespect, the feminists are silent. Elizabeth Warren was incredibly aggressive, bordering on abusive, in her questioning. If a male Republican senator had spoken to Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton that way, it would be front-page news for a month. Sexism in the Senate, they would scream. But because it is woman on woman, and because the victim is a conservative, it is allowed. In fact, it is celebrated. It shows you that their feminism is just a political tool, not a principled stance. They don't support women, they support liberal women. There is a big difference. What happens next? They will try to refer this to the DOJ for criminal prosecution. They will try to get a special counsel appointed. They will keep this cloud hanging over Bondi's head for as long as possible. The process is the punishment. Even if she is eventually cleared, even if they never find a smoking gun, they will have dragged her name through the mud for years. She will have to spend millions on legal fees to defend herself. That is the goal. To bankrupt her and break her spirit. It is a warning to anyone else thinking of stepping up. Look what we did to Bondi. Do you want that to happen to you? It is mafia tactics disguised as congressional oversight. But here is the thing about Pam Bondi, she is tough. You don't become the Attorney General of Florida and take on the pill mills and the human traffickers if you are soft. She has seen worse than Elizabeth Warren. She has stared down real criminals, not just political ones. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was the calm before the storm. She knows that you don't win this fight in the hearing room. You win it by surviving, by regrouping, and by fighting back on your own terms. The mega movement is behind her. We see through the charade. We know that every attack they launch is a badge of honor. It means she is effective. It means she is a threat to their power. Let's look at the deleted records claim again. In the digital age, nothing is ever truly deleted. Warren knows this. If the records were actually deleted, how does Warren know they existed in the first place? Think about that. She claims there are gaps. How do you prove a gap? You have to know what was supposed to be there. It is a logical trap. It is pure speculation presented as fact. We didn't find the email where she confessed, so she must have deleted it. It is laughable. But the mainstream media repeats it as gospel. Bondi deleted evidence, the headlines scream. No, she didn't. There is zero proof of spoliation of evidence. But the accusation is enough to do the damage. And why focusing on Russia? Why not China? We know for a fact that China is influencing our universities, our technology sector, our politicians. But you never see Elizabeth Warren holding a hearing on Chinese influence operations. Why? Because the corporate donors of the Democrat Party are making a fortune in China. They don't want to rock that boat. Russia is a convenient boogeyman. Their economy is the size of Italy's. They are not the existential threat to our dominance that China is. But Russia is the politically safe target. It allows them to look tough on national security without actually hurting the bottom line of their Wall Street backers. It is performative hawkishness. The $847,000. Let's break it down further. Was it income? Was it a retainer? Was it for travel and expenses? Warren doesn't say. She just throws the number out there because it sounds big. To the average American struggling to pay for groceries, $847,000 is a fortune. It breeds resentment. It is class warfare. Warren, a multimillionaire herself, is using class warfare to attack another successful woman. It is cynical. She wants you to be jealous of Bondi so you won't listen to what Bondi has to say. It is a classic divide and conquer strategy. Look at this rich lady with her Russian money. Meanwhile, Warren lives in a mansion in Cambridge. Do not fall for it. We are watching the criminalization of politics. We are watching the weaponization of the Senate. And we are watching a media establishment that is complicit in the destruction of due process. Pam Bondi is the target today, but the real target is the movement she represents. They want to delegitimize the entire America First agenda by painting everyone involved in it as corrupt foreign agents. It is the only card they have left to play. They can't run on the economy. They can't run on the border. They can't run on crime. So they run on Russia and corruption. It is a desperate flail from a dying establishment. This hearing was a disgrace to the Senate. It was a kangaroo court. But it was also clarifying. It showed us exactly who Elizabeth Warren is. It showed us exactly what the Democrats are willing to do to hold on to power. And it showed us that we have to fight harder than ever. If they can come for the Attorney General with flimsy evidence and a media mob, they can come for anyone. We need to stand with Bondi. We need to reject this narrative. And we need to demand real accountability, not for private citizens conducting business, but for the government officials who are leaking our data and weaponizing our laws. Let's dig deeper into this concept of shadow banks that Warren was so breathless about. It sounds terrifying, doesn't it? Like some dark alleyway in the financial district where guys in trench coats exchange briefcases. But in reality, what she calls a shadow bank is often just a non-bank financial lender or a fintech company. These are businesses that sprang up because the traditional big banks, the ones that donate millions to Democrat campaigns, by the way, have become too bureaucratic and too woke to serve actual entrepreneurs. If you are a conservative, if you work in industries the left doesn't like, such as firearms or oil and gas, you have probably faced debanking. You have probably had your accounts frozen or closed for a reputation risk. So where do you go? You go to alternative financial institutions. And now, Elizabeth Warren wants to criminalize that too. She wants to force everyone back into the arms of the big banks that she claims to hate but actually controls through regulation. It is a pincer move to control the financial freedom of every American citizen. The hypocrisy regarding foreign influence is perhaps the most galling part of this entire charade. Elizabeth Warren sits there and lectures Bondi about Russian money, while the entire Democrat Party apparatus is awash in foreign cash. Think about the think tanks in DC that write the policy papers Warren cites. Who funds them? Qatar, Saudi Arabia, China. The list goes on. These countries pour millions into the Brookings Institution, into the Atlantic Council, into the very organizations that staff the Biden administration. But nobody asks about that influence. Nobody holds a hearing about how Qatari money is shaping our Middle East policy. No, that is considered diplomacy or cultural exchange. But let a Republican lawyer take a check from a client with a Russian passport, even a client who might be trying to get away from Putin, and suddenly it is high treason. They have created a standard where any contact with the non-Western world by a conservative is suspect, while they sell out our country's interests wholesale to the highest global bidder. And let's look at the victim here. Who exactly was harmed by Bondi's actions? Warren can't name a single American who lost money. She can't name a single national security secret that was compromised. The victim in her narrative is the abstract concept of sanctions integrity. But let's be honest about sanctions. They are a tool of foreign policy, often a failed one. They are not the Ten Commandments. Navigating them is a legal specialty. If Bondi found a legal way to help a client navigate a complex regulatory regime, that is called being a good lawyer. It is not a crime to read the law and find the loopholes. That is literally what lawyers are paid to do. Warren, as a former law professor, knows this better than anyone. But she is banking on the fact that you don't. She is banking on the fact that you will confuse legal advocacy with criminal conspiracy. We also need to address the encrypted emails again because this point cannot be stressed enough. Warren is trying to criminalize privacy. She is establishing a precedent that if you are a public figure, you have no right to a private conversation. Imagine if they applied this to the founders. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams used ciphers. They used codes to communicate. Were they hiding something? Yes, they were hiding their plans from a tyrannical government. Privacy is not an admission of guilt, it is a prerequisite for liberty. By framing encryption as evidence of a cover-up, Warren is effectively saying that the government has a right to read your mind, to read your diary, to know your every thought. It is the ultimate surveillance state fantasy. And they are using the pretext of national security to sell it to you. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. That is the slogan of every totalitarian regime in history. The media's role in amplifying this hearing is also critical to understand. They didn't just report on it, they choreographed it. They had the graphics ready. They had the experts lined up to explain why Bondi is finished. It was a coordinated rollout. This tells you that the hearing wasn't an investigation, it was a press release. It was a marketing campaign for the Democrat Party's narrative that Republicans are corrupt. They know they are losing the working class. They know that the average truck driver and waitress are turning to the GOP. So they have to destroy the credibility of the GOP leadership. They have to make you think that the people fighting for you are actually crooks. It is psychological warfare. They want you to feel demoralized. They want you to feel like there is no one left to trust, so you might as well just give up and let the experts run your life. Do not give them that satisfaction. Let's talk about the $847,000 in a different light. Suppose it was true. Suppose Bondi did take the money to help a Russian client. Is that inherently anti-American? Since when is everyone in Russia our enemy? There are business people in Russia who hate Putin. There are people trying to get their money out of that country before the state seizes it. Helping them might actually be a good thing. It might be draining resources from a rival. But the nuance is lost in Warren's black and white world. To her, Russian equals evil. It is a xenophobic, simplistic worldview that ignores the complexities of the real world. And it is dangerous because it shuts down any possibility of engagement or understanding. It pushes Russia further into the arms of China, which is the real strategic disaster of this administration's policy. Bondi might have been playing 4D chess while Warren is playing checkers, and Warren wants to put her in jail for it. The silence of Bondi is being framed as taking the fifth without actually taking the fifth. It is being framed as cowardice. But ask yourself, what would you do? If you were sitting in that chair, knowing that every word you spoke would be twisted, knowing that the person asking the questions had no interest in the truth, would you engage? Or would you let them rant? There is a dignity in silence. There is a strength in refusing to play their game. Bondi looked at Warren and saw a toddler having a tantrum. You don't negotiate with a toddler. You wait for them to tire themselves out. By not feeding the beast, Bondi deprived Warren of the oxygen she needed. The hearing ended, and Warren looked exhausted and shrill, while Bondi looked composed. In the long run, that image will matter more than the accusations. Furthermore, where is the investigation into the leakers? I keep coming back to this because it is the root of the rot in Washington. Someone in the Treasury Department, specifically in the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, likely accessed these suspicious activity reports, SARS, and handed them to Warren's staff. That is a felony. It is a federal crime to leak a SAR. Has the FBI raided Warren's office to find the source? Of course not. Has the DOJ opened an investigation into the leak? No, because the call is coming from inside the house. The law enforcement agencies are protecting the leakers because the leakers are on their team. They have weaponized the financial surveillance system against their political enemies. This should scare every American more than any consulting fee Bondi ever took. It means your bank data is safe only as long as you vote the right way. We also have to consider the political timing argument. Why this hearing? Why now? Look at the calendar. We are approaching a critical election cycle. The Democrats are desperate for a distraction. The economy is teetering. The world is on fire. They need a shiny object. Look over here. A Republican took money from Russians. It is the look a squirrel tactic of politics. They treat the American voter like children with short attention spans. They think if they dangle a scandal in front of you, you will forget that you can't afford eggs. You will forget that your rent has gone up 30%. It is insulting. But it is also a sign of weakness. If they had a strong record to run on, they wouldn't need to do this. They wouldn't need to drag Pam Bondi through the mud. They would just talk about their achievements. The fact that they are resorting to character assassination proves they have no achievements to talk about. And what about the intermediaries? Warren makes them sound like Bond villains. But in international business, intermediaries are often just law firms, accounting firms, and consultants. They are the gears that make the global economy turn. By demonizing these standard business relationships, Warren is casting a chill over American competitiveness. Who will want to do business with an American firm if they know their name might be dragged into a Senate hearing just because of a political vendetta? This hurts our economy. It drives business to London, to Dubai, to Singapore. Places where they understand that business is business and politics is politics. Warren is driving capital flight with her rhetoric. She is hurting the very economy she claims to want to fix. Let's not forget the sheer arrogance of Elizabeth Warren. This is a woman who believes she knows better than you how to spend your money, how to run your business, and how to live your life. Her attack on Bondi is an extension of that arrogance. She cannot conceive of a world where someone disagrees with her and is still a good person. If you disagree with her, you must be corrupt. You must be paid off. It is a totalitarian mindset. It rejects the legitimacy of opposition. In her mind, Bondi isn't a colleague or a fellow American, she is an obstacle to be removed. That is the mentality that leads to gulags. It starts with hearings, it starts with investigations, and it ends with the criminalization of dissent. We are on a slippery slope, and Elizabeth Warren is greasing the skids. The mention of deleted records is particularly insidious because it plays on the Nixon tapes trope. It is designed to make you think of 18.5 minutes of missing audio. But in the modern IT world, data retention policies are standard. Companies delete emails after 90 days or 6 months to reduce liability and storage costs. It is routine. Warren knows this. But she frames a routine IT policy as destruction of evidence. It is a lie by omission. She is omitting the context to create a crime. And because Bondi didn't take the bait and explain IT retention policies to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which would have been boring and looked defensive, the accusation stands. It is a heads I win, tails you lose situation. Let's look at the bigger picture of the Russia hoax. This is season 5 of a show that should have been cancelled years ago. First it was the Steele dossier. Then it was the Mueller probe. Then it was impeachment 1. Then it was the Hunter Biden laptop letter. Every single time, the Russian connection turned out to be exaggerated, fabricated, or completely false. But they keep going back to the well. Why? Because it works on their base. Their base has been conditioned to hate Russia with a Cold War intensity that is bizarre coming from the party that used to preach detente. They need an external enemy to justify their internal crackdowns. If Russia is the enemy, then anyone who opposes the Democrats is a Russian asset, and therefore an enemy of the state. It allows them to treat domestic political opponents as foreign combatants. That is the ultimate goal of tying Bondi to Russia. It strips her of her rights as an American citizen in the eyes of the public. If we look at the $847,000 again, we should ask, what about the tax revenue? Bondi surely paid taxes on that income. She contributed to the US Treasury. She brought money from overseas into the American economy. Isn't that what we want? We want American services, including legal services, to be an export. We want to bring foreign capital here. But Warren treats the money as if it is radioactive. She acts as if the dollars themselves are tainted. It is a superstitious view of economics. Money is fungible. Once it is in the US banking system, it is US capital. But logic has no place in a witch hunt. The attack on Bondi is also an attack on the state of Florida. Florida has become the beacon of freedom in this country. It is where woke goes to die. It is a success story of conservative governance. Bondi is a product of that success. By attacking her, they are attacking the Florida model. They are trying to say, look, even their top officials are corrupt. They are terrified that the rest of the country will look at Florida and say, we want that. They want to discredit the Florida blueprint before it can go national. This is about 2028. This is about stopping the next wave of conservative leadership before it even forms. And think about the personal toll. Pam Bondi has a family. She has friends. She has a reputation built over a lifetime. Elizabeth Warren tried to incinerate all of that in 60 minutes for a few poll points. It is cruel. It is inhumane. But it is standard operating procedure for the left. They do not care about the human cost of their politics. They will grind anyone into dust if it advances the revolution. We need to remember this when they talk about empathy and kindness. Their kindness is reserved for their allies. For their enemies, there is only the boot. Finally, let's consider what wasn't discussed. While Warren was obsessing over $847,000, how many billions were being wasted by the federal government that same morning? The Department of Education? The foreign aid packages? The green energy subsidies for companies that go bankrupt? The waste is astronomical. But a private citizen making less than $1 million is the scandal? It is a distraction of the highest order. They are straining at a gnat while swallowing a camel. They want you focused on Bondi's bank account so you don't look at the national debt clock spinning out of control. It is a magic trick. Look at the shiny hand, ignore the man behind the curtain stealing your children's future. This hearing was a test. It was a test of our resolve. It was a test of our ability to see through the fog of war. If we let them take down Pam Bondi, they will move on to the next target, and the next. We have to draw a line. We have to say, enough. We have to recognize this for what it is, a desperate attempt by a failing regime to criminalize its opposition. Pam Bondi stood strong. She didn't give them an inch. Now it is our turn to stand with her. We need to reject the lies, reject the framing, and reject the premise that Elizabeth Warren has any moral standing to judge anyone. The real verdict won't be delivered by the Senate Judiciary Committee. It will be delivered by the American people at the ballot box. And believe me, the people are watching, and they are not amused by this circus. Let's zoom out and look at the machinery of this hearing. You have the leaks, you have the media narrative, you have the grandstanding senator. But what is the engine driving this? It is the fear of the Great Awakening. They know that the American people are waking up to the fact that the game is rigged. They know that we are realizing that the Department of Justice has become the Department of Injustice. Pam Bondi represents the corrective force. She represents the possibility that the DOJ could actually return to its original mission, upholding the Constitution, not protecting the political elite. And that terrifies them. If Bondi is allowed to take the reins, she opens the files. She sees who signed the FISA warrants. She sees who authorized the raids on peaceful pro-life activists. She gets the keys to the kingdom of secrets. And they cannot allow that to happen. This $847,000 is a blockade. It is a desperate attempt to bar the door before she can walk in and turn on the lights. We need to talk about the precedent of guilt by association that Warren is pushing. She kept showing these organizational charts. You know the ones, big red lines connecting photos of people. Bondi knows person A knows person B is a Russian. This is the logic of a conspiracy theorist, not a United States senator. It is the kind of stuff you see on a corkboard in a basement in a movie. But because it is presented on C-SPAN with the seal of the Senate behind it, it is given the veneer of legitimacy. If we used this standard on the Democrat Party, the chart would look like a bowl of spaghetti. Everyone in DC is connected to everyone else. It is a company town. But Warren isolates Bondi's connections and strips away the context to make them look sinister. It is a visual lie. And consider the intermediaries again. Warren described them as shadowy. What does that even mean? Does it mean they work at night? Does it mean they wear masks? No. It means Warren doesn't like them. It is a scary word used to fill the void of evidence. If she had evidence that these intermediaries were actually intelligence officers, she would say it. She would say, "This person is GRU." But she doesn't. She calls them shadowy figures. That is the tell. That is how you know she is bluffing. When a prosecutor has the goods, they are specific. When a politician is lying, they are vague. Warren was the queen of vagueness in that hearing room. Let's pivot to the impact on national security argument. Warren claims Bondi's actions weakened our stance against Russia. How? By accepting a legal fee? Did the Russian army advance because Pam Bondi got a wire transfer? Did Putin pop a bottle of champagne because a Florida lawyer got paid? It is ludicrous. Our stance against Russia is weakened by weak leadership in the White House. It is weakened by a military that is more focused on pronouns than lethality. It is weakened by an energy policy that forces us to buy oil from our enemies instead of drilling it here at home. Bondi's bank account has zero impact on the geopolitical balance of power. But Warren needs a scapegoat for the failures of the Biden-Harris administration. She needs to point to a Republican and say, it's her fault. It is scapegoating, pure and simple. There is also a disturbing undertone of legal privilege being eroded here. The attorney-client privilege is sacrosanct. It is the bedrock of our legal system. You must be able to tell your lawyer everything without fear that the government is listening. Warren is attacking that privilege. She is demanding to know the internal communications between a lawyer and her client. If she succeeds, if she normalizes this, then no one is safe. The government can demand your divorce lawyer's notes. They can demand your defense attorney's strategy emails. They are chipping away at the walls that protect the citizen from the state. And they are doing it in the name of transparency. It is Orwellian. Transparency now means the government sees everything you do, but you see nothing of what the government does. Let's look at the shell companies in the Caribbean that Warren referenced. The Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands. Yes, they are tax havens. Do you know who uses them? Everyone. Apple, Google, Facebook, George Soros, the Clinton Foundation. The entire global financial system runs through these jurisdictions to optimize tax liability. It is legal. It is standard. But when Bondi is linked to it, suddenly it is money laundering. Why doesn't Warren hold Tim Cook in front of the Senate and scream at him about his offshore accounts? Because Tim Cook is a donor. Because big tech censors conservatives for the Democrats. It is a symbiotic relationship. Bondi is outside that club, so she gets the hammer. It is selective enforcement of moral outrage. The silence strategy that Bondi employed is also a masterclass in grey rocking. Do you know that term? It is a psychological technique used to deal with narcissists. You become uninteresting. You become a grey rock. You don't give them the emotional reaction they crave. Warren is a political narcissist. She wanted a fight. She wanted the drama. By denying her that, Bondi took the wind out of her sails. You could see Warren deflating as the hearing went on. She was running out of steam because she wasn't getting the pushback she needed to keep the energy up. It was a brilliant tactical maneuver. It showed that Bondi is not easily rattled. She has the temperament for the job. Warren, on the other hand, looked unhinged. She looked like she was losing control. We have to ask, who leaked the encrypted emails? I know I keep coming back to this, but it is the smoking gun of the deep state's involvement. Encryption keys are not just lying around. To break high-level encryption requires supercomputers or a backdoor. If the NSA is using its capabilities to spy on domestic political opponents, that is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. That is a violation of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It is a crime worse than Watergate. Watergate was a clumsy break-in by some low-level operatives. This is the full might of the US intelligence apparatus being weaponized against a future attorney general. Where is the ACLU? Where are the civil libertarians? They are silent because they hate Trump more than they love the Constitution. Their silence is complicity. Let's discuss the $847,000 figure in terms of campaign finance. Elizabeth Warren raises millions from educators and unemployed people in small donations. But we know about the smurfing scandals, where donor names are used without their knowledge to launder big money into small increments. The Democrat fundraising machine is a black box of potential fraud. Yet, they focus on one-wire transfer to Bondi. Why? Because it is easier to tell a story about one person and one check than it is to unravel the massive, systemic corruption of the Democrat fundraising apparatus. They project their own systemic sins onto an individual Republican. It is a distraction technique. Don't look at our dark money machine, look at this lady's consulting fee. This hearing was also an attempt to demoralize the mega base. They want you to look at Bondi and think, oh no, another one of our heroes is corrupt. They want to sow doubt. They want to make you cynical. They are all the same, they want you to say. But we cannot fall for that. That is how they win. They win by making you stay home on election day. They win by making you turn off the news. We have to look at the facts, not the innuendo. The fact is, Bondi has not been charged with a crime. She has not been convicted of a crime. She is being smeared in a political forum where the rules of evidence do not apply. We have to hold on to that distinction. A Senate hearing is not a court of law. It is a TV studio with better furniture. And what about the deleted records? Let's be technical for a moment. Deleted does not mean destroyed with intent to hide. If you have a duplicate file, you delete one. If you have a draft, you delete it when the final version is done. Warren framed every deletion as a sinister act of shredding evidence. It is a manipulation of the mundane. If someone audited your computer right now and found you deleted a grocery list from 2022, could they accuse you of destroying records? In Warren's world, yes. If that grocery list was tangentially related to a Russian salad dressing, you are in trouble. That is the level of absurdity we are dealing with. The media coverage following the hearing was predictable. The New York Times ran a headline about shadowy funds. CNN ran a panel discussion about Bondi's credibility crisis. It is a feedback loop. Warren creates the content, the media amplifies it, and then Warren cites the media reports as proof that people are concerned. It is a circle jerk of the elite. They talk to each other, they validate each other, and they think they are informing the public. But the public is seeing through it. We are seeing the coordination. We see the talking points go out at 4 a.m., and by 6 a.m., every liberal talking head is using the exact same phrases. Shadow banks. Sanctions evasion. Dark money. It is scripted. Let's consider the Russian angle from a historical perspective. The Democrats laughed at Mitt Romney in 2012 when he said Russia was a geopolitical foe. Obama mocked him. The 80s called, they want their foreign policy back. Now, suddenly, the Democrats are the biggest hawks on Russia? Why the flip? Because Trump wanted to get along with Russia. Trump wanted to focus on China. So, logically, the Democrats had to take the opposite position. If Trump said the sky was blue, they would pass a resolution declaring it green. Their hatred of Russia is not based on principle, it is based on opposition to Trump. Bondi is caught in that crossfire. She is collateral damage in their war against the Orange Man. The accusation that Bondi influenced policy to prioritize foreign financial interests is an insult to her patriotism. This is a woman who has served her country. She loves America. The idea that she would sell out her country for a paycheck is a projection of the Democrat mindset. They sell out the country. They sell our manufacturing base to China. They sell our borders to the cartels. They assume everyone else is as transactional and unpatriotic as they are. They cannot comprehend someone acting out of duty or conviction. To them, everything has a price tag. So they assume Bondi has one too. We also need to look at the role of the never Trumpers in this. You know they are quietly cheering Warren on. The Lincoln Project types, the old guard of the GOP who were pushed out by the MAGA movement. They hate Bondi because she represents the new Republican Party, bold, populist, and unwilling to apologize. They want the old days back, where Republicans were polite losers who cut deals with Democrats at cocktail parties. Bondi doesn't cut deals. She fights. And that is why the establishment, both Democrat and Rhino, wants her gone. She is a disruption to the status quo. What should be the response? The response should be a counter-investigation. If the Republicans retake the Senate, the first hearing should be into Elizabeth Warren's finances. Let's look at her family's dealings. Let's look at how her net worth exploded while she was in public office. Let's apply the Warren standard to Warren herself. I guarantee you she wouldn't last 5 minutes under that kind of scrutiny. She would crumble. Because bullies always crumble when you punch back. And that is what we need to do. We need to stop playing defense and start playing offense. The $847,000 is a weaponized number. It is specific enough to sound real, but large enough to sound scary. But in the world of corporate litigation, it is the budget for photocopying. Seriously. The scale of money in DC is incomprehensible to normal people, and Warren exploits that gap. She weaponizes the class divide. She, the Harvard professor, pretends to be the champion of the working man by attacking a successful woman. It is the ultimate gaslighting. She is the elite. She is the establishment. Bondi is the outsider trying to break in. Let's talk about the optics of the interrogation. Warren leaning forward, pointing her finger, voice raised. It was aggressive. It was designed to intimidate. But Bondi sat back. She didn't flinch. That body language tells you everything. A guilty person fidgets. A guilty person tries to over-explain. A guilty person gets defensive. Bondi was still. Stillness is power. In the martial arts of politics, Warren was flailing, throwing haymakers that missed. Bondi was the master, waiting, breathing, observing. She won that exchange without saying a word. The future of the America First legal movement depends on people like Bondi surviving these attacks. If they can take her out, they will go after the young law students, the young clerks, the future judges. They want to make it career suicide to be a conservative lawyer. That is the long game. They want to capture the entire judiciary for a generation. This hearing was a warning shot to the next generation of conservative legal minds. Stay in line, or we will Warrenize you. We have to ensure that threat fails. We have to support our legal warriors. The policy influence claim is also incredibly vague. Did she write a memo? Did she change a regulation? Warren never says. She just implies. Influence. It is a ghost. You can't fight a ghost. That is why they use that word. If they said she changed Regulation X on date Y, Bondi could produce the record proving she didn't. But influence is a vibe. It is an atmosphere. You can't disprove a vibe. It is the perfect smear because it is unfalsifiable. It is the hallmark of a witch hunt. And let's not forget the irony of Warren attacking offshore interests when she represents Massachusetts, a hub of global finance and biotechnology, industries that are deeply engaging in offshore tax planning. Her own donors are doing exactly what she accuses Bondi of. But she gives them a pass. Why? Because they pay the toll. They donate to the DSCC. They kiss the ring. Bondi didn't kiss the ring. She challenged the ring. And for that, she must be punished. Finally, in this segment, look at the coordination with the fact-checkers. Within minutes of the hearing, the so-called independent fact-checkers were releasing articles confirming Warren's claims. True, Bondi received money. True, companies were in the Caribbean. They confirm the basic facts but ignore the context that makes it legal. They provide the cover fire for the narrative. The fact-check industrial complex is part of the attack. They are not neutral arbiters, they are the cleanup crew for the Democrat Party. They polish the lies until they shine like truth. Chatbot Tin TUC 60 PHUT. Gem 2 Chin. Let's circle back to the accusation about deleted records, because this is where the double standard is so glaring it is blinding. Elizabeth Warren acts as if hitting the delete key is a felony. But where was this outrage in 2016? We all remember BleachBit. We all remember hammers destroying Blackberries. We all remember 33,000 emails vanishing into the ether under subpoena. Did Elizabeth Warren hold a hearing then? Did she scream about institutional accountability then? No. She endorsed the person responsible. The hypocrisy is not just a bug in their system, it is the operating system. They have established a precedent that destroying evidence is perfectly fine if you are a Democrat, but managing your inbox is a crime if you are a Republican. It is a two-tiered justice system that stares you right in the face. Bondi knows this. Her silence in the face of such hypocrisy wasn't just a legal tactic, it was a refusal to validate their fake morality. And we need to talk about the Russian intermediaries accusation again. Warren paints a picture where anyone with a Russian surname is a spy. It is a new form of McCarthyism. Actually, it is worse than McCarthyism, because McCarthy was actually looking for communists who wanted to overthrow the government. Warren is looking for capitalists who just want to do business. She is criminalizing commerce. If you buy vodka, are you funding the war machine? If you represent a client who owns a dacha, are you a trader? This guilt by association logic is slippery. It starts with Bondi, but where does it end? Does it end with you being investigated because you bought software from a developer in St. Petersburg? They are building a digital iron curtain, and they are trapping American citizens behind it. Think about the sheer logistics of what Warren is suggesting. She suggests that Bondi, a single attorney, orchestrated a massive sanctions evasion scheme right under the nose of the most surveillance-heavy government in human history. It implies that the FBI, the CIA, and the Treasury were all incompetent, but Elizabeth Warren, with her Senate staff, cracked the case. It is arrogance. It assumes that the entire national security apparatus missed what she found. Or, more likely, the national security apparatus knows there is nothing there, which is why Bondi wasn't charged. Warren is trying to criminalize what the DOJ already cleared. She is trying to relitigate the past because she doesn't like the present. The $847,000 is also a figure that needs to be contextualized within the world of lawfare. Conservatives today have to pay a mega tax. If you are a conservative lawyer, you need armed security. You need cybersecurity that costs a fortune. You need to insure yourself against frivolous bar complaints filed by leftist activists. That money Bondi earned? A huge chunk of it probably went to protecting herself from the very people attacking her now. The left attacks you, forces you to spend money to defend yourself, and then attacks you for earning the money you need to pay for that defense. It is a cycle of destruction. They want to bleed you dry. Bondi earning a living is her way of staying in the fight. Let's look at the optics of the hearing room again. The Democrats invited the press. They probably leaked the opening statement to the press beforehand. This was a coordinated media event. It wasn't a fact-finding mission. If they wanted facts, they would have deposed her in private. They would have asked for documents in writing. Doing it on live TV proves the intent was humiliation, not investigation. They wanted the clip of Warren pointing her finger. They wanted the soundbite. It is governance by meme. They are treating the United States Senate like a reality TV show set. And the producers, the Democrat leadership, are scripting the drama. We should also discuss the national security argument Warren loves to deploy. She claims Bondi compromised national security. But who actually compromises national security? It is the people who leave our borders wide open. It is the people who surrender in Afghanistan and leave billions of dollars of equipment behind. It is the people who allow Chinese spy balloons to traverse the entire continental United States. Those are the real national security threats. But Warren ignores those. She focuses on a lawyer in Florida. Why? Because the real threats are caused by her party's policies. She needs a diversion. She needs you looking at Bondi so you don't look at the sky or the border. The silence of Pam Bondi is also a testament to her legal acumen. She knows the perjury trap. You see, when you are in a hearing like that, if you make a tiny mistake, if you say the meeting was on Tuesday when it was actually on Wednesday, they will charge you with lying to Congress. It doesn't matter if it was an honest mistake. They will use it to destroy you. We saw this with General Flynn. They catch you on a technicality. By saying nothing, or by saying very little, Bondi denied them the raw material to manufacture a perjury charge. It was the smartest thing she could do. It frustrated Warren because Warren was ready to spring the trap, but the mouse didn't take the cheese. There is also the women supporting women angle that the left completely abandoned here. Elizabeth Warren claims to be a champion for women in power. Yet, here she is, attempting to dismantle the career of a successful, self-made woman. It proves that their identity politics is a sham. You only count as a woman in their eyes if you subscribe to their ideology. If you don't, you are fair game. You are a gender traitor. The vitriol Warren directed at Bondi was personal. It was the anger of an academic who thinks she is smarter than everyone else, looking down on a practitioner who actually gets things done. It was the ivory tower versus the main street. Let's analyze the shell company's rhetoric one more time. In the global economy, privacy is a legitimate commodity. High net worth individuals, whether they are Russian, American, or Martian, do not want their names on every public registry. They use LLCs for safety. They use them to prevent kidnapping, extortion, and harassment. By framing this standard safety measure as criminal concealment, Warren is putting people at risk. She is suggesting that transparency is more important than safety. But again, this only applies to her enemies. I guarantee you Elizabeth Warren's address isn't listed in the phone book. She values her privacy. She just doesn't value Bondi's. And what about the victimless crime aspect? Sanctions are a regulatory tool. Violating them is a regulatory issue. It is not murder. It is not theft. It is not assault. But Warren speaks about it with the moral fervor of a preacher condemning a cardinal sin. She elevates a bureaucratic infraction, if it even happened, to the level of moral depravity. This is how they manipulate your emotions. They take a technical violation and dress it up as a moral failing. They want you to feel disgusted by something that is, at worst, a paperwork error. It is emotional manipulation 101. The encrypted emails narrative is also a direct attack on the legal profession. Lawyers have a duty to encrypt. If Bondi didn't encrypt her communications with her clients, she would be committing malpractice. Warren is effectively attacking Bondi for being a competent lawyer. She is saying, you should have left your digital door unlocked so we could snoop. It is absurd. It is like attacking a doctor for sterilizing their instruments. Encryption is the hygiene of the digital age. Warren wants us all living in filth so she can inspect the germs. We must also consider the timing of the leak. Why now? Why this specific week? Was there a bad poll number for the president? Was there a bad economic report? Usually, these bombshells are timed to bury bad news. We need to look at what else happened on the day of the hearing. What were they trying to hide? Maybe it was the inflation numbers. Maybe it was a new migrant caravan. The media covers the hearing so they don't have to cover the failures of the administration. Bondi is the heat shield for the Democrats. She takes the fire so the president doesn't have to. The $847,000 also raises the question, is that it? After years of investigation, after digging through every trash can and server, the best they could come up with is a transaction that is less than $1 million? In the world of international corruption, that is peanuts. If Bondi was truly the Russian asset they claim she is, the numbers would be in the tens of millions. The relatively small size of the amount actually suggests it was a legitimate legal fee for specific work performed, not a bribe. Bribes are usually much bigger. But Warren hopes you don't know the market rate for treason. She hopes you see a big number and panic. Let's talk about the future of the Republic rhetoric Warren used. She said Bondi's actions threaten the fabric of our democracy. Give me a break. A lawyer getting paid threatens democracy? You know what threatens democracy? Kicking candidates off the ballot. Censoring free speech on social media. Weaponizing the FBI against parents at school board meetings. That is the real threat. But they always accuse you of what they are doing. They are the ones tearing the fabric of the country apart, and they use Bondi as the scapegoat. It is a classic projection. Stop hitting yourself, they say, as they punch you in the face. Bondi's refusal to answer questions about the nature of the work is also protected by privilege. She cannot ethically discuss the details of her client's case in a public forum. Warren knows this. Warren knows she is asking questions Bondi cannot legally answer. It is a setup. If Bondi answers, she gets disbarred for violating privilege. If she doesn't answer, she looks guilty to the public. It is a Kobayashi Maru, a no-win scenario designed by a dishonest operator. But Bondi navigated it by staying silent. She chose to look guilty to the ignorant rather than actually be guilty of ethical violations. It was the principled choice. The media's focus on Bondi's stone-faced demeanor is also telling. They wanted tears. They wanted a breakdown. They wanted the hysterical female trope. When Bondi gave them the stoic warrior, they didn't know how to process it. So they called it arrogance. They called it contempt. No, it was composure. And in a city full of hysterical people, composure is a superpower. It showed that she is the adult in the room. Warren was the one waving her arms and shouting. Bondi was the one sitting still. Who looked more presidential? Who looked more like an attorney general? We also have to ask, who is the client? Warren kept implying it was the Russian state. But it could have been a private company, a family office, a charity. We don't know. And Warren doesn't present proof that it was the Kremlin. She just uses the word Russia as a blanket term. It is lazy. It is xenophobic. And it is dishonest. There is a difference between the Russian government and a Russian person. The Democrats used to understand this distinction when they were defending civil liberties. Now, they have adopted a collective guilt mindset. If you are Russian, you are Putin. If you talk to a Russian, you are Putin. It is a toddler's understanding of the world. The evading sanctions charge is also a way to enforce foreign policy through the back door. Sanctions are executive orders. They are not laws passed by Congress in the traditional sense. They are edicts from the president. By criminalizing the evasion of these edicts, they are effectively making the president a king. They are saying his word is law, and anyone who tries to find a legal way around it is a criminal. It is an expansion of executive power that conservatives should be very wary of. Bondi was navigating a regulatory maze, not breaking the 10 Commandments. And let's look at the influence aspect. Did Bondi influence Trump? Did she influence the DOJ? Warren says yes, but offers no specific instance. Policy shifted, she says. Which policy? Did sanctions get lifted? No. Did the US recognize the annexation of Crimea? No. So where is the influence? If she was paid to get results, and no results happened, then she was a bad lobbyist, not a criminal. But the facts don't matter to Warren. The narrative matters. The narrative is Republican equals Russian puppet. And she will hammer that square peg into a round hole until the end of time. This hearing was the desperate flailing of a dying establishment. They see the writing on the wall. They see the polls. They see the cultural shift. They know their time is running out. So they are trying to salt the earth. They are trying to burn down the reputation of anyone who might replace them. Pam Bondi is just the first in line. They will come for the others. They will come for the vice president. They will come for the cabinet. This is a scorched earth strategy. They would rather rule over the ashes than lose power. But here is the good news, it isn't working. The American people are tired of the Russia wolf being cried. We have heard it too many times. We are desensitized to it. When Elizabeth Warren screams Russia, we just hear static. We just hear a politician trying to save her own skin. Pam Bondi's silence resonated louder than Warren's shouting because it represented the dignity of the truth against the noise of the lie. The truth is simple, Pam Bondi is a patriot who is being targeted because she is effective. And no amount of Senate theater can change that fact. So, what do we do now? We don't apologize. We don't back down. We don't let them frame the narrative. We tell the truth about what happened in that room. We tell our neighbors, hey, that wasn't an investigation, that was a commercial for the Democrat Party. We debunk the lies about the $847,000. We explain the reality of legal privilege. We become the media that the mainstream refuses to be. We support Bondi. We support the movement. And we remember this moment when we go to the ballot box. They wanted to use this hearing to destroy us. Instead, let's use it to unite us. Let's make Elizabeth Warren regret the day she decided to pick a fight with Pam Bondi. Because she didn't just pick a fight with one woman, she picked a fight with 75 million Americans. And that is a fight she is going to lose. Let's look at the chilling message this hearing sends to the private sector. We are telling the best and brightest legal minds in this country, do not serve. If you are a successful partner at a firm, if you have international clients, if you have built a life of wealth and professional accomplishment, the message is clear, stay away from Washington. If you come here, we will subpoena your client list. We will leak your tax returns. We will drag your name through the mud. This ensures that the only people who end up running the government are people who have never done anything else. It ensures a permanent class of career politicians who have no idea how the real world works. They want to purge the government of anyone who understands business, anyone who understands profit, anyone who understands the actual economy. They want a government of, by, and for the bureaucrats. Pam Bondi is a threat because she has a foot in both worlds. She knows the law, but she also knows how the private sector operates. And we simply must make the direct comparison that the media refuses to make. We must talk about the Biden family business. We have emails, not encrypted, but plain as day, discussing 10% for the big guy. We have wire transfers from China, from Ukraine, from Romania. We have diamonds. We have Ferraris. We have a drug-addicted son sitting on the board of an energy company he knew nothing about. Where was Elizabeth Warren's chart for that? Where were the red lines connecting Hunter to Joe? Where was the outrage about national security? It was non-existent. The silence from the Democrats on the Biden corruption is deafening. It proves that they don't care about foreign influence. They care about Republican influence. They are fine with China buying the Biden administration because they agree with the policy outcome. But they are willing to destroy Bondi over a fraction of that money because they fear her policy outcome. It is political tribalism masquerading as ethics. This hypocrisy breeds cynicism. It makes the average American look at Washington and say, burn it all down. And frankly, can you blame them? When you see a two-tiered justice system where a conservative is hunted for sport while a liberal is protected by the entire apparatus of the state, you lose faith in the system. Elizabeth Warren is not saving democracy, she is destroying the people's faith in it. She is proving that the game is rigged. And when people believe the game is rigged, they stop playing by the rules. That is the danger she is courting. She is pushing the country toward a breaking point with these show trials. Let's talk about the intermediaries again from a different angle. In the world of intelligence gathering, sometimes you have to talk to bad guys. Sometimes you have to deal with the devil to get information. If Bondi was working on sensitive matters, maybe those shadowy figures were sources. Maybe they were providing intel. We don't know, and Warren doesn't care. She assumes the worst. But imagine if we applied this to the media. Journalists talk to terrorists. They talk to cartel leaders. They talk to dictators. Do we accuse them of being assets? No, we give them Pulitzer Prizes. We say it is reporting. But when a lawyer does it, it is collusion. It is a double standard that protects the media class while demonizing the legal class. We also need to address the deleted records in the context of attorney work product. There is a doctrine in law that protects the mental impressions, conclusions, opinions, or legal theories of an attorney. It is absolute protection. If Bondi deleted drafts or notes, she was likely protecting her work product from prying eyes. That is her right. In fact, it is her duty. Warren, as a former law professor, knows this. She is deliberately conflating the destruction of evidence with the protection of work product. She is lying to the American people about how the law works. She is counting on your ignorance to score a political point. It is intellectual dishonesty of the highest order. Consider the $847,000 in the context of the cost of living in the circles these people move in. It sounds like a lot to us, but in the world of high-stakes DC litigation, it is the cost of doing business. But more importantly, why is making money a crime? The left has this underlying Marxism where all profit is theft. If you make money, you must have exploited someone. You must have cheated. They cannot accept that value-for-value exchange is moral. Bondi provided a service, she got paid. That is capitalism. That is the American dream. Warren wants to turn the American dream into a crime scene. She wants you to apologize for your success. She wants you to feel guilty for winning. Pam Bondi doesn't apologize. And that drives them crazy. The silence was also a mirror. By saying nothing, Bondi forced Warren to keep talking. And the more Warren talked, the more unhinged she sounded. She started repeating herself. She started screeching. She lost her composure. If Bondi had engaged, it would have been a debate. By staying silent, it became a monologue. And a monologue by a frantic, angry radical is not a good look. It exposed the hollowness of her arguments. She had to fill the airtime with adjectives because she ran out of nouns and verbs. She ran out of facts, so she switched to insults. It was a cell phone. What about the policy-influenced allegation? Let's assume for a second that Bondi did try to influence policy. Isn't that what every single person in Washington does? What do you think the teachers' unions do? What do you think the green energy lobby does? They pay millions to influence policy. They write the bills. They hand them to the Democrats to sign. But when a conservative tries to advocate for a different viewpoint, it is undue influence. It is foreign interference. They have defined democracy as only our side gets to lobby. If you lobby for their side, it is civic engagement. If you lobby for the other side, it is corruption. It is a closed loop. And let's not forget the role of the never Trump Republicans in the Senate. Did you see them jumping to Bondi's defense? Did you see them yielding their time to let her speak? No. They sat on their hands. They are complicit. They want the MAGA movement dead just as much as the Democrats do. They are happy to let Warren do their dirty work. They can go back to their donors and say, "See, we aren't the ones attacking her, it's the Democrats," while secretly popping champagne. This hearing exposed the fault lines within the GOP. It showed us who the fighters are and who the cowards are. And right now, the cowards outnumber the fighters in the Senate. The shell company's narrative is also a direct attack on privacy rights. We have a right to privacy in this country. It is in the penumbras of the Constitution, as the liberals love to say when they are defending abortion. But when it comes to financial privacy, suddenly the right disappears. They want a central bank digital currency, CBDC. They want to track every penny you spend. If you buy a gun, they want to know. If you donate to a trucker convoy, they want to freeze your account. The attack on Bondi's use of LLCs is part of this broader war on financial privacy. They want to make anonymity illegal. They want total panopticon surveillance of your wallet. Let's look at the timing of the Russian narrative resurgence. The war in Ukraine is going poorly. The sanctions haven't worked.